It's the 5th of February 2018. I'm at work. I'm spinning 7 plates. I'm trying to arrange webinars. I'm trying to get people to live events. At 2:30 in the afternoon, my phone rings, and it's Lindsay. Lindsay's been in hospital for a few weeks antenatally. She's 7.5 months pregnant with our first child. Things haven't been going very well. She's now got signs of preeclampsia. Her wrists and ankles have been swelling up. And she says to me on the phone, she says, they decided to deliver the baby tomorrow. It's going to be delivered by C-section tomorrow. And I went, okay. So I went to tell my boss, who very graciously said, right, off you go. See you in 2 weeks. On the way home, I trudged home in the snow. On the way home, I stopped at an Asda to look for size 0 nappies, which they didn't have, and maternity pads, which I didn't really know what they were, and I've discovered since that you never want to ask. I went up to the Jessops Hospital in Sheffield the next morning. Everyone's very calm. I remember the calmness of the anaesthetist. I remember the shuffle of Crocs on the floor when we got into surgery. I remember the hum of the big extractor fan above the table. I remember Hugo's first cry. I remember him being whisked by us, blue and angry, being ripped out into the world. I remember going to see him at the back of the room with the neonatal team, with the tiniest oxygen mask held over his face, watching his chest, same shaped chest as me, same shaped chest as my granddad actually, watching his chest heave up and down in an effort to breathe. After that, Hugo was taken away to the neonatal intensive care unit. We went back to the ward that Lindsay was on. All of a sudden, we've had a baby, but we don't have a baby. You got this immediate sense of what's happened. What have we lost? Of course, we hadn't lost him. So we nagged and we got the hospital staff to wheel Lindsay's bed over to the NICU, to the neonatal intensive care unit. We couldn't hold him straight away, but we managed to put our hands into the incubator. Just put our hand on his tiny body. You could put your finger in his fist and he'd grip onto it. This kind of reflex grip reaction. I remember walking home that evening because I went and stayed at home while Lindsay was still in hospital. I remember walking home thinking, he's 0 days old. We always talk about how old we are, how many years old we are. I remember walking home that night thinking, there's a human in there that's 0 days. As time progressed, we realised that Hugo wasn't the smallest or the sickest baby in the neonatal intensive care unit by a long stretch. Many of the babies were born at 24 weeks, 26 weeks gestation and onwards. The nurses in the NICU were very skilled at watching the readings that were above each incubator that monitored heart rate and blood oxygen saturation levels. These monitors tended to emit this terrible alarm if the levels went too low. Of course, the parents were very jumpy. The nurses were very skilled at kind of glancing at the readings and not appearing overly concerned. Sometimes a consultant might be brought in, or maybe an X-ray machine might be brought in. But on the whole, the NICU was a very enabling environment. We were encouraged to be there. As he got a bit bigger, we were encouraged to take him out of the incubator, to do skin-to-skin time with him. We used to feed him every 3 hours. So because he was so small, he was fed through a nasogastric tube that went up his nose and down into his stomach. So you'd feed him every 3 hours through a syringe full of freshly milked milk. And you'd have to watch this syringe drip slowly down into his stomach and watch him hiccup afterwards. And hope to God that he didn't throw up all over his incubator, especially at 4 a.m. So we used to do that. Every 6 hours you change his nappy and hope that there wasn't some nasty black poo that had escaped all over the place. So we very quickly went from a relationship of dependence on the doctors, dependence on the nurses, to an enabling environment where we were encouraged to take responsibility, do more ourselves, begin looking after him, begin the process of being a parent, stepping forth, growing up. 2 years later, when my daughter was born, we went through the same thing. My daughter was born slightly earlier. She was born at 32 weeks gestation. So for the blokes listening to the show, babies are normally born at about 40 weeks, give or take. So Ruma was born 2 months early. We went through it was a carbon copy experience of the shuffle of crocs on the floor, the C-section, the angry baby that we didn't see then for a while. That was at the start of COVID, so Ruma was born the day that the pub shut in the UK. So it was completely different second time round. I was at home with Hugo, who was then 2. So we were stuck at home. We didn't have any help because no one was allowed to visit us, essentially. Lindsay and Ruma were in hospital. Ruma was in hospital for longer than Hugo because she was a lot smaller. Once a day I'd bring Hugo to hospital. He wasn't allowed in the ward because of the restrictions that came in. But Lindsay and I would swap, and she'd take Hugo out to the park for a couple of hours. I'd have a couple of hours skin-to-skin time with Ruma, potentially doing some of the cares, potentially doing some of the feeds. It was a tough time, in all honesty. It was a time where I think we all lost our marbles a bit. We didn't have the support that we needed. I think a lot about the story of the birth of my kids as the beginning of something. It's the beginning of something bigger. The starting point in a journey that hasn't yet played out. I speak to my Sovereign Finance podcast co-host Derek Dearden every week. A few years ago we co-created a book called The Letter from 2100, A Possible World for Your Grandchildren. In 2100, all being well, my kids will be 80 and 82. And I think a lot about the world that they might live in. What world do I want them to live in? Well, I want them to live in a world where they're enabled, they're empowered to follow their own path, express themselves as the fullest version of themselves, where they understand their story, where they came from, which is why the incubator story matters, because it's the beginning of that story, it's the beginning of that journey. You have to understand and know the story in order to own it and tell it. I hope they live in a world where they're able to travel anywhere without restriction, doing work that they uniquely are here to do in service to others. That's what I hope for them. And my work has really become a stepping stone into that. I keep asking, what does the world need in order to get to that utopian future? Well, the world needs many things. I think we're living in a dark time, quite frankly. I think more and more people are seeing that. There's a lot of talk about waking up to it, but I think we are all waking up in some regards. We're all on a journey. And my vision for my work here is to hold events around the world for individuals who are sovereign, who work on their own terms, march to the beat of their own drum, act in service to others, build something that contributes to a better world. That's the audience that I serve. I envision travelling the world to hold storytelling events for those people so that they can explore and share and document their story and put their story out into the world so that other people can hear it, can relate to it, can be inspired by it, can see possibility from hearing those stories. Foundationally, I think the world needs better stories. I think we need to take control of the stories we tell each other, rather than regurgitating the stories that we've been fed. You know, if you want to change the world, you change the stories and change the narrative. So that's what my work is here to do. That's my vision for things. Today's episode of Story Systems is about the fifth of my core story prompts. and it's the vision. The vision is slightly different to all the other prompts because it both looks backwards and forwards. It both presents the world that you envision, and I encourage you to not let your pessimist voice sabotage this. Ignoring the self-doubt, what's the utopian world that you would like to create if nothing was off the table? What's the perfect world? How do you want the world to be? I think we should be aiming a bit higher here. So the vision prompt asks, what's the world that you're trying to co-create? And then how do you envision you and your work contributing to that world? And also, what's the origin of that vision? Where does it stem from? So as always, we're going to cover 3 ideas. The 3 ideas are the origin, the future, and the gateway. So let's go and have a look at the first idea. The first part of the vision prompt is to pinpoint a story from your past. So the vision prompt is like January. It's like the month of January. If you think about Janus, where he's looking forwards, but he's also looking backwards, he's got a face on both the front of his face, looking at the year ahead, and behind him at the year behind. That's what the vision prompt is like. It's like Janus with 2 faces on the front and the back. So first of all, we're going back, and we're trying to pinpoint a story from your past that is really the opposite of your vision for the future. So my vision for the future is really one where sovereign humans have figured out how to co-create a world that works for everyone. That's my utopian vision for the future. And if that sounds, it might sound implausible, but I think if we don't do it, I think we're going to go the way. We might go the way of the dinosaurs. I think it could be the only future for us potentially. So why not envision that? If enough people envision that, set the intention, then I think that between us, anything is possible. So the first part of the vision prompt is to work that vision right back to the beginning, going into your past, and picking out one story, one situation that demonstrates the opposite of that. And I picked out the birth of my kids partly because in some regards the births and deaths are a universally relatable experience. Even if you don't have kids, you'll have known people who've had kids who might have been through similar traumas. I mentioned the birth of my daughter Ruma, who was born during the COVID times. And I think most of us know someone who had some kind of story from there, either based around the isolation or went through some kind of experience. Not everyone was just learning new hobbies at home. The other reason I've chosen the birth of my kids as the starting point in my vision story is because my vision's all about independence and becoming sovereign. It's a funny word, sovereign, isn't it? It's got connotations to regality, but I think we need to evolve it to individual level. It's about how we are all sovereign and that we've had it taken away from us in different ways by the powers that ought not to be. And it's about regaining that level of control and ownership of our future. So the opposite of these ideas of becoming sovereign, control, self-dependency, ownership of our future, the opposite for that for me was being in the neonatal intensive care unit, where Hugo and Ruma, they were completely dependent on both us and the staff. And in the very early days, we were completely dependent on the staff. It was all largely out of our hands for a time. And that's the point I keep coming back to. So the journey, the full transformation, is going from this principle of dependency to being sovereign and being independent. There's been many steps along the way as I've gone on this kind of sovereign journey. I thought the rabbit hole was yay deep, and I've realised it's about 20 times deeper. And sometimes they're the best journeys to go on, and that your vision should be about a big journey. It should be about a journey that isn't complete yet. That might never even be complete. This this utopian future might not ever come to pass, but some flavour of it might. We're all very poor at predicting the future. But that was the first idea, was that the place to start with the vision prompt is to pinpoint an event from your past that is the opposite of your vision from the future, and to start talking about that. So what is that starting point for you? The second idea to talk about then is heading into the future and having a section after the parts of your story where you talk about the past, where you're talking about your vision for the future. And this is a quite an unusual thing in storytelling, because storytelling is natively past tense. Yes, sometimes I encourage people in the telling of a story to dip into present tense because it can help people pull people into the moment of the story. But stories as a beast are past tense. We're facing back. We're looking back to face forwards. We're understanding ourselves by looking at the golden thread of events that run through our past in order to determine the thread of events that are going to come in the future. We're manifesting forwards by looking back. So in the future part of the story, so I was telling you how I envision running events for people around the world and holding space for people where they can come and share stories that are going to inspire and impact other people. There's an element of intention setting to this talking about the future. So in the vision prompt, you start off by talking about the past and sharing a story that is the opposite of your vision. You then want to outline your future in terms of how you envision the world. What situation, being specific, what situation do you imagine? So the vision prompt is really about intention setting as well. There's also a visual element to it. So yes, so with the story part that's back facing, you've got this conventional narrative thread. In the part that faces forwards, it can actually help to think about what a day from that future might look like. It can also help to start to assemble images, like I've got on my vision board behind me, which you'll be able to see if you're watching the video version of this. It can start to help to assemble images of what this vision might look like. Because the part of our brain that deals with the future is image oriented. And this is something as a wordsmith that I've had to come to terms with. But ultimately what the words do, words paint images in the mind. So in the part of your vision prompt that's facing forwards, you want to be as specific as possible about the nature of your vision. Where is it going to be? Who are you going to be with? If you're going to run events, where are these events? I could have been more specific and said my event will be on the beach. I actually have a beach image on my vision board. Can't quite see it at the moment, but there's a beach image in Australia actually, which is something that I'm slowly working on manifesting into reality. So with the future part of the prompt, you want to be more visual. You want to start assembling images. I think it's a good idea to have a vision board. I think it's a good idea to think about, well, what is your day in the future as part of this vision? And there might be two elements of the future. I talked about what life might be like in 2100 when I'm gone, and the world that my kids might live in at that point when they're in their old age. But then you want to scale it back and ask, well, for you and your work in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, what does that look like? What stepping stone do you contribute to along the way? So that's what you need to think about. And just have a bit of fun with this. Try to have a bit of fun. Don't take it too seriously. I struggled with the vision for a long time because I think it's easy to tie yourself in knots. Whereas the nice thing about preparing the image board is it just gives you something tangible to work with. And it can be fun. It can be fun to create this vision board. So have a bit of fun with it and try not to take it too seriously. And what we're doing here is we're intention setting. We're setting direction and we're setting intention, even if the specifics of that destination don't actually come to pass. third idea to mention here about the vision prompt is that you've got a good opportunity at the end of your vision story to include a gateway into your offer, into how people can work with you. So you can say at the end of your vision story, if this is a vision that you're looking to co-create, if you're ready to build this sovereign world, then if you're ready to begin understanding and sharing your story, then you want to go to whatever the starting point is. So for me, it could be, you might want to check out my Story Jumpstart service that I run with entrepreneurs. It could be to point you towards my Wise Echo service for preserving cross-generational stories. I've got a few options in there of how I can gateway people from the vision story into my offer. And it's a gateway because it's not a hard pitch. It's not a call to action. Calls to action are much more, go here, do this. That's like sales talk. Go here now, do this. It's a limited time offer. I don't think that's quite appropriate in the vision prompt. I think this is more of a gateway where people who are ready, people who share your vision and are excited about it and have felt a resonance with what you've said, it's a gateway for them to walk through if they're ready to walk through it. It's not a hard call to action. So you can include a gateway at the end of your story of like, if you're ready right now, head to this domain and take a look at whatever it is. So you can put a link in here to your work, but you want to make it a gateway, not a vanishing tomorrow deadline specific call to action. We're at the end of this episode about the vision, so let's do a bit of a recap. The vision is unique in terms of the 5 core story prompts in that it both looks back and looks forwards. It's really a forward-facing prompt. If you think about the hero's journey, and just to do a bit of a recap, the first of our core story prompts was the wounding event, which correlates to the call in story terms. It's the point at which you first set off on your journey to where you are today. Some event triggers you to head down the path that you're on. We then had the false start prompt where things go well for a while, but you're not operating as your true authentic self. We then have the central crisis, which is what I call the self-understanding prompt, where you break down in some capacity and you're cracked open as a result you understand yourself properly and truly. The fourth prompt then was the key insight, was the insight of how you marry that with what the marketplace, what the world, what your audience needs. The fifth prompt then is the future-facing one of like, what are you going to co-create with them? And all of the clients that you work with, you do co-create with. I think in business, like if someone works with you today or works with you in 2 years, they don't put their foot in the same river twice because the river has changed. You have changed. You have moved on. You co-create with every client that you work with. So what's the vision that you're going to co-create with them? Because your vision is what's going to inspire people. It stems to purpose. It stems to your why in Simon Sinek terms. So you have to communicate this, because unless you've got a vision and unless you're communicating it, then you don't have a why. You don't have a purpose. You're just out to pay the mortgage, pay the bills, and that's okay. But it's not going to change the world. It's not going to get anyone excited. It's not going to create a movement. It's not going to really change the world for the better, other than putting bread on the table. So what is your vision for the future? My work here really is for people who do have purpose, do have a vision, do have a mission, and that mission is what my friend Evelyn Clark calls has been activated. They're on a mission. They've got this mountain that they're trying to walk towards. What is that mountain? Talk about it. Tell me about it. That's the fifth prompt. We covered 3 ideas on this prompt today. The first was the origin, was to go back in time, talk about the origin, to pinpoint a story that's the opposite of your vision for the future. The second idea was the future, was the outline, where it is that you're trying to head towards. And the third idea was the gateway, in terms of presenting not necessarily a call to action, but a link to your work at the end of this prompt, and a way that people can then, if they're ready, they can begin to work with you. What else is going on in my world? As I record this episode, it's a rainy day in early February. It's actually the 6th of February today. It's the 6th of February 2026. So it's Hugo's 8th birthday. We're exactly 8 years on since the origin story that I told you at the top of this episode. I wanted to record today's episode today for this reason, because I think anniversaries matter. Anniversaries are perhaps a whole another story prompt that we could go into in the future. So I wanted to record today's story about the vision because it's on my mind today. He's suddenly grown up into a great big gangly 8-year-old who's obsessed with Mario Kart and has challenged me in all sorts of ways that I didn't expect, and is both fun and drives me mad. But yeah, it's been on my mind. And again, sometimes you should just tell the stories that are on your mind, because if it's on your mind, it's there to be told. We're at the end of this series about the 5 core story prompts. I would encourage you to go back as you need to across the 5 prompts in order to put them into practice, in order to put them to use in your own marketing. There's a few ways that you can use the 5 prompts. I would recommend you start off by using each prompt independently and creating 5 different stories, as I've done with these 5 podcast episodes. You could also create 5 emails, but you could also tell them as a single story, because the point about these 5 prompts is that they all kind of tie together. They begin to thread a particular golden thread across the relatively messy events in your past. What the 5 core story prompts do is they pick a coherent path through your story in terms of where you came from, what's inspired you, and where you're going in the future. And then you end with an invitation for people who resonate with your values, because you'll have communicated your values in the telling of these stories. So for people who resonate with your values, you invite them to join you on that journey. And that's the point of telling these. That's why I've selected these 5 core story prompts. There's some other story prompts. As I've just mentioned about anniversaries, there's some other story prompts. There's actually a lot of other story prompts that didn't quite make the cut. I really wanted to select just 5 because people are always asking me, I've only got time to write 5 emails. I don't have time to write 15. So what are the top 5? So these have been my top 5. Yes, there are more if you want to come deeper. We haven't talked about anniversaries. We haven't talked about location. We haven't talked about the controlling idea. There's all sorts of things that didn't quite make the cut that we might get to in due course. But yeah, start with these 5. See how they look. See how they feel to you would be my recommendation. If you put these 5 prompts to use, please do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to read them. I'd love to give you my feedback on them. So head to storyrob.com. Head to the contact page. Send me a message. I'd love to see what you produce. If you found this episode of Story Systems helpful, you'll want to make sure you're on my email list. I'll send you a copy of my Lead Incubator System Blueprint and also my top 5 core story prompts for entrepreneurs. Head to storyrob.com/podcast. You can also find my book by searching on Amazon for Simple Story Selling. See you next time.